All right, good evening. Let's talk about changing a flat tire. So if you're out on a ride, whether you got a road bike, tri-bike, it doesn't really matter too much. All the principles are still the same. So what we'll start off with is the bare minimum. So first you're gonna need a pouch. Most pouches are standard. They're all designed to fit under the saddle of your bike. They have a couple straps. They have seat post strap. Pretty universal. Tube. Want to make sure you have a tube. You want to make sure it's a correct tube, especially if you have a couple bikes with a couple different tire sizes. Usually on the tire somewhere there's some sort of a stamp that tells you the correct size. Then we have our CO2 cartridges. You can get them plain like this, or some come with some foam on there, because when you inflate your tire, it's CO2, so sometimes it creates a very, very cold surface. So the foam is really nice. And we have our CO2 dispenser. There's a couple different kinds. This one has a lever, and then this one has a dial. I already have this one hooked up, so you'll get a chance to see that in action. And we want a couple bike levers. Some brands, they're stackable, so they store very nice. You just snap it together and it's just one piece. And basically that's the bare minimum, and everything will be in your pouch and you're good to go. You have everything that you need to change a tire. I'll do my example on a front tire because it's a lot easier. I'll talk about the rear tire really quick. And for a rear tire, the best thing that you could do when you got to take this off is make sure you switch your gears to the lowest cog, okay, which is your hard gear. The smallest one, the smallest cog, has the less tension on your rear derailleur, which means everything is in line. So when you undo your skewer, you pull your skewer out, okay, you should basically just pull the tire right out as you take the chain off. When you're in the bigger cog, that's when your derailleur is more engaged and there's more tension on the cables. So it makes it a lot harder to put the tire back on the bike once you change your flat. So when you realize you have a flat, go ahead and put it down into the hardest gear, which is, your smallest cog here, and that'll make taking the tire on and taking it off so much easier. Okay, so just remember that. You have a flat anyway, it might be a little hard to pedal, or you can get off your bike, switch your gears, and then just work your pedal and get it down to the smallest cog. So that's just a little tip. And also, while we're talking about it, some valves, okay, don't have a little nut, and I'll show you on my other tire. This one doesn't have a little nut. Okay, they're Presto valves. All right, so we'll put that one down here, and I'll get my front tire. Front tire obviously is a lot easier to change because you don't have to mess around with the chain. So let's get to our stem here, our valve. And like I mentioned earlier, some of them have a little nut on there. Okay, so we experience a flat, pull over to the side of the road, get into the grass, find somewhere safe to change your tire, and then obviously we're going to unloosen our skewer, pull our skewer out, pull our tire out, and set our tire down. Make sure you get all your equipment out, get it out of your bag. And what we're going to do first is make sure you unloosen the Presto valve. And sometimes you get a flat, but all the air doesn't come out. So it's going to make it really, really hard to break the seam around the wheel. So go ahead and spin down your Presto valve and just keep pressing it. Kind of roll a little bit. Make sure you get all the air out of the tube. Because if it's like a small pinch flat, there still might be some air in here. So once you do that, then the little nut on here should come off very easily. You should be able to just spin it with your finger. Because once the air is out of the tube, it relieves a lot of pressure, so you should be able to spin that off, okay? And make sure you set that to the side, set it somewhere, like if you got a helmet or you got a set of gloves, put all your little pieces, all together so you don't lose them like in the grass, okay? So now we've deflated our tire, okay? We've gotten all the air out of it. So now what we'll do is, now we'll get our levers, and like I said, they're usually, you can put them together. So we separate our levers, and you can sit down by the side of the road, you know, well, not in the road, but the side of the road if you're on a highway. Just sit somewhere safe. Make sure you're kind of watching traffic sometimes. It's a good safety tip. So what we're going to do is, we have the curved portion of the lever. So what we want to do is, we kind of want to work it in there and get a bite, okay? But we want to go easy. You don't want to stick it in there too hard. You want to go nice and easy, because we want to make sure that, you know, we don't wreck the tube if we don't have a new tube. Because say we got to put a patch on the tube, we want to make sure, you know, we don't ruin it. So I would say go ahead and start with one lever, okay? You want to just get a little bit of the tire off the wheel, and then I would go probably maybe 3 spokes, you know, 3 spokes away, and now you want to get right in there, nice and easy, okay, and then pull it out, okay. So once you got your 2 levers about 2.5 spokes apart, okay, you're already going to start to see the tire rise a little bit, okay. That means you broke the seal. So now all you need to do is just nice and easy, okay, rotate that lever. Just rotate that lever all the way around, and if it comes out, just stick it back in, rotate it around there nice and easy, just like that. And then guess what? Now you broke the whole seal of your tire. So set your levers aside. Now you want to go back to usually where the stem is. Sometimes it helps to pull it out there. So what you want to do is try and take your tire and push it to the one side. Now let's start off of the stem. So we want to reach in here, right? We want to get the, pull your tire back, and then, okay, grab your tube, work your tube around, okay? Just go ahead and keep spinning it. Just keep pulling it out, and just keep rotating it, rotating it. It should come right out, and then we'll get back to our stem, okay? So what we want to do is try and turn the tire way down to the outside of the rim, and there we have it. Our tube comes out, okay? Here's our stem. So we'll assume that we got a brand new tube. This one's got a hole in it. It's no good. So we take our new tube. Here we go. We got our new tube. And you want to make sure too, sometimes a lot of the rims have a rubber liner, okay, that goes all the way around to protect the tube from the spokes. As they pierce through the wheel, there should be like a big rubber band to kind of protect that. So what we'll do is now we're putting it back on, okay? So always start with our stem, okay? Stick our stem, okay, right in the hole. And it's nice to sometimes just kind of lay the tube right on the tire, just kind of like that, so then you can work it in. So now we just work in reverse order, okay? So now you want to go ahead and pinch that tube right in there. Sometimes it might come out on you, but you just hold it down. All right, and we just work that tube in. That's all we do. Just work the tube in, and I'll show you a little trick afterwards too. Let's get the tube out of here. All right, just keep working it around. Oh, our other tube's caught here. Get rid of that. Okay, so you might have to go around a couple times, okay? You got to make sure, okay, because this is our new tire. So we don't want to wreck this tire. So what we got to do sometimes is keep working around and keep stuffing the tube in case it wants to ride out. So what we can do is, and I found out the best place to start is usually like 4 or 5 spokes away from hopefully the stem, okay? So now we want to start pinching our wheel, okay? We want to start pinching our wheel together. and that's what's gonna beat it back onto the wheel. So you just kind of pinch your fingers together. So now we're basically remounting the tire back on the wheel. Now see this right here? You got to be careful of that. See how I pinched the tube in between the tire and the wheel? We don't want that to happen. So we got to make sure, you know, we get the tube back inside the wheel, because we don't want to create another flat when we put it all together. We don't want that to happen. And so what's going to happen is, once we get the wheel closest to being securely fastened, it's going to be really, really hard, just because of the bead that goes around the actual tire to keep it stiff. So now we can go back to our lever again, and very, very carefully kind of just reach in there a little bit, because we don't want to pinch our tube, and then we can just, you know, pop the tire, there we go, pop the tire back onto the wheel. So right now our tube is fully inserted into our tire. So what I like to do too, especially if you have some time, is work the wheel around like this, okay? Kind of push and pull a little bit, work it around, especially around the stem, okay? We want to make sure that our tube inside is completely seated in the tire and not pinched in between the wheel. So just kind of work your fingers around, just like that. That should help alleviate any problems and any more pinch flats from when you inflate this bad boy. So when we get to our stem, okay, so we want to pull up on our stem. Remember our little nut washer thing that we talked about, okay? We want to put that back on there. We'll spin that down, just hand tight, that's all. It doesn't have to be too hard. So just hand tight. Okay, so here we are now. We got our tube inside our tire. Now we're ready to inflate. So what you'll have is, you'll have your CO2 dispenser, and you'll have a CO2 cartridge. And I know there's a couple holes, okay? There's one here, the one here. Might look a little confusing, but if you look hard enough, you'll see the thread part. So what you'll do is, you'll screw that in there. You want to screw it really good. Sometimes you'll maybe hear like a little pop or whatever, but you want to make sure it's in there nice and hard. Okay, I won't do that one because I don't want to waste the tube. So then I'll give this one that's already done, okay? And you want to make sure that's in there nice and hard, okay? And here we have our little valve. And if you're not 100% sure it's seated, you can test it a little bit. Just grab your little stem and give it a little twist. Make sure it's coming out, okay? So what we want to do is, now you got to be very careful. Maybe if you got biking gloves, or you can use a shirt, or you can use something. That's why I like to buy the ones with the foam, okay? So you don't freeze your hand. You got to be kind of very careful not to, you know, put any freezer burns. So what you want to do is place, okay, the other side here, there's the hole, okay? You want to place that right over the valve, push it down really good, and give your little knob a turn. And I just put a little bit of air in there because the cold air was blowing out on my fingers. So, and that thing's nice and hard. It's not fully dispensed, okay? So if it's fully dispensed, you probably would have enough air. That's still, it's hard, but you want to put pretty much all of it in there. But enough to get you started, just so you can, another thing too is, sometimes it's good to go with just a little bit, and just to make sure, you know, you don't see your tube anywhere, or you don't have any other pinches, okay? So if everything looks good, then we can, you know, finish up. Like I said, we can put that on there and press down, and I don't know, you probably have to look at the, get that off of there, the rating of the CO2s, because that's pretty solid right there. I actually don't think that you probably want to put the whole canister of air in there, depending on what size tire you got, because that's pretty hard. There's a lot of air in there. And that is it. So the tire's ready to go back on the bike. So make sure you pick up your mess, put put everything back in your pouch, especially the inner tube. Okay, so we'll assume that this is our bad inner tube. Just kind of get all the air out, roll it up as best you can, stuff the flat one back in here, put everything else, your levers, your empty CO2, don't leave it on the ground, don't leave it in anyone's yard. Take it home with you, throw it out, put it back in your pouch. Just keep the place nice and clean, like you found it, and then people won't be hating on bikers. So make sure you pick up your area. Now this is ready. This is ready to go back on the bike. A good rule of thumb is sometimes when you take off the front skewer, you forget, oh my goodness, you know, which side does the lever go on? Which side does the lever lock or the lever release go on? Just remember, the lever in the rear should match the lever in the front. So that way when you put your skewer back on, both levers for the skewers are on the same side. And that's simple. You shouldn't have any trouble. It's always good to practice. If you buy one of these, buy a couple extra tubes just to kind of test it out so you know what you're doing. You don't want to have it to be the first time when you get a flat and you really need your bike fixed. You don't want to run into a struggle. So that's it. It's done. It's that simple. Practice a little bit. Practice taking the tube out. Oh, one last thing too is now that your tire is inflated, you might want to tighten up that little nut on your Presto valve. And like I said, that's it. Now you can tighten your... I wish I had a pressure gauge with me because then I could check that, but I was just curious how much air went in there. But just give it a good gauge, you know, just to give it a good press. Make sure it's nice and hard. That's it, man. You got your tire changed, and now you're really ready to get biking again. All right, have a good night.